A PhD is not just about research. Research should be the primary thing that you do to make sure that you complete. But there are so many side quests during a PhD that sometimes they can completely distract you from the main thing that you should be doing. During my PhD, I was teaching, I was project managing, I was looking after stuff in the lab, I was responsible for certain instruments, I was, just doing loads of other admin types things that just were completely aside from the main thing that I should be doing. And I think this is where people get confused when they think about the skills that PhDs can bring to a certain job or position outside of academia. Anyone that's got through a PhD has shown they can manage a complicated project with multiple stakeholders and key performance indicators so that they complete their PhD and this very complicated project on time. I think that it's those skills that really sort of set PhD students apart once they get to the end. The thing is that all of these things are actually far more valuable after a PhD than your actual research. Sure, my research was fun at the time, but the skills that I built up are actually far more valuable for what I'm doing at the moment, which is this online entrepreneurial thing. And also, working in industry. It was all of the project management skills that were actually far more valuable than my research skills. So yeah, it's not just about the research. A PhD is not about planning your way to success. Sure, you need to have a roadmap. You need to understand where you're headed, but you cannot plan the way to there completely because, there was a boxer that said everyone's got a plan until they get hit in the face. And that's just like a PhD. You can have a plan, but it's really about learning to overcome failures and then readjusting your plan to match what you've just learned from your failure or that thing that didn't really go well. So it's much more about overcoming the challenge that is directly in front of you, learning from that challenge, and then deciding which way you'll go afterwards. There's no point sitting at the beginning of a PhD and planning out your entire roadmap. Just plan the next step, and then the information that you learn from that will dictate the direction you should take in your research. A PhD is no longer a ticket to an academic career. Now, this very much depends, obviously, on the field of study that you have decided to do your PhD in. For example, in the sciences, it is very difficult to end up in a tenure track position. However, two of my friends, one in languages and one in music, have actually ended up in a position at a university. So it really does depend on the field that you're going into, but they end up doing a lot more teaching than research, whereas in the science world, you often end up doing more research than teaching. And so maybe that's the balance. If a university can see your value in terms of what you can teach, then maybe you're more likely to get a position. However, it is not a ticket. You still have to prove yourself, you still have to build up the right relationships, you still have to do all of the right things to get your foot in the door in academia. And remember that a PhD is just the first step on your academic career path. Once you've proven you can do research and you can produce papers or a thesis, then it's about proving yourself over and over again for many, many years to build up to that kind of full-time permanent position, which these days is very, very rare to get. A PhD is not just for young, newly minted graduates. Now, a lot of people go back to do a PhD later on in their life, and that's because they want to get specific skills to further their career, or they've got to a point in their career where they want to try something completely new. I have got a lot of sort of mature age students on this channel that watch, and they often comment in my forums and in the comments below, and one thing that I always sort of am struck by are these people seem to be the most sure of doing a PhD than anyone else that comments. They know that they want to do this because they've experienced the real world for a long period of time, and they want to go back and explore a part of the world that really interests them, or they're doing it to further their career. One person I actually worked alongside during one of my postdocs, they were doing a PhD because it would help them access higher pay scales in their current government role. So doing a PhD as a mature age student can be one of the best decisions you can make, but quite often we think about it as kind of like the freshly minted graduate that goes in to do a PhD. But I think PhDs are super valuable later on in a career when you have reached kind of a tipping point and you want to go one way or another, and a PhD can be a great way to kind of push you into a new field or to push you higher up in your current career. A PhD is not about inspiration. In fact, sometimes it's not about being intellectually stimulated at all. There are so many aspects of a PhD that are mind-numbing. Like, I had to get significance in my results by repeating the same thing over and over again. And that's after it actually had to get through all of the failures that I had to persevere through to get something that worked. And then once I found something that worked, I had to do the same thing another 10, 20 times to prove that it was reproducible. And so getting to a certain point is intellectually stimulating, but then it's about grunt work. Like, my partner came to the university once when I was doing an overnight experiment, and I was like, oh, I just need to pop to the lab, do you want to come? And she was like, this is so weird. Like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be like. I was like, yeah, it's just like a really sort of technical, hands-on role that involves me doing these little kind of like manipulations. I think you become like a manufacturing line, at least in my science position. Once I'd kind of like got a system, I then had to prove it had worked. And then I just became like working in a factory, a science factory, to produce these results. So it's not always intellectually stimulating. In fact, a lot of the really good science comes from the reproducibility of stuff. And I'm sure that could sort of like hold true for your specific field as well. So don't expect it to be all inspiration and kind of like aha moments. A lot of the time, it's just about being a bit bored and doing the work. Doing a PhD is not about having a high IQ. In fact, some of the people that appear to me to be the top of the class in undergraduate really struggled through their PhD because they hadn't built the skills of failing. They hadn't built the skills of making small decisions every day. They hadn't built up the persistence of kind of what research requires of you, and therefore they really, really struggled. So you can be the cleverest person on earth, but really fail when it comes down to hands-on research because you haven't built up that resilience or the skills or the techniques to be able to handle the lifestyle that research demands of you. And so you don't have to be particularly clever. You don't have to be sort of seen as a genius to do a PhD. In fact, I think that can actually hamper some of your progress because the expectations of you are so much higher. Whereas if you go in and you say, yeah, I've been able to get a PhD position, step one. Step two is to do it. There's a lot less kind of expectation on you, and therefore you can kind of enjoy the process a lot more rather than worrying about being the clever one or the cleverest or being at the top of the pack. So yeah, it's not about being clever, it's just about doing. Clever people sometimes struggle with the doing aspect. So there we have it. There's everything you need to know about what a PhD is not. Let me know in the comments what you would add, because you always add some awesome things to my videos and I love seeing them pop up, and it gives me something to think about and helps me mold my ideas as well. So thank you. And also remember to go check out academiainsider.com. This is my project where I've got my ebooks, the Ultimate Academic Writing Toolkit, as well as the PhD Survival Guide. And if you want some freebies, go sign up to my newsletter where you'll get 5 emails over about 2 weeks, everything from the tools I use, the podcasts I've been on, how to write the perfect abstract, and more. It's completely free, exclusive content, so go sign up. You got nothing to lose. All right then, I'll see you in the next video.